My talk is about why the first and second person pronouns are special, but before I get into that, I just wanted to say that I think it's clear that you and I are special. It's a very special scholarly community we have here, and Ivan is a big reason for that. And I also wanted to mention my other affiliation, Dead Tongues, I'm very proud of. One of the many things I learned from Ivan is the importance of starting a rock and roll band in one's department. And I went out and I did that. So I'm just... Okay. All right, I'm just going to start right in. So there's an interesting universal generalization about first and second person plural forms. Namely that they don't seem to exclude reference to others than the speaker or speakers, and addressee or addressees. So, for example, English I refers to speaker, you to addressee. We can be used for multiple speakers. It's rare, but the sort of we are the champions, chanting in unison. It can be for speaker and other. For example, I could be talking about my wife and I, she's not here, and I could say we built an addition on our house. Speaker plus addressee, shall we go? Speaker, addressee, and other. Can't we all get along? You, plural, can be for multiple addressees or for addressees and others who are off stage. So I could be talking to, there could be just a single addressee, and I could say you, plural, like, I hear that you guys built an addition on your house. Some languages distinguish inclusive versus exclusive, meaning whether it includes or excludes the addressee, such as Indonesian. But there seems to be no language that makes the further distinction. So that third column, those aren't words. I just made those up. There's none that seems to distinguish the we are the champion type from the other, nor the inclusive that also includes others versus excluding others. And perhaps most surprising, there's no sort of true second-person plural in any language. So no language has a second-person plural that's exclusively for referring to just the set of addressees. And when it so this is believed to be an absolute universal. So this is based on, typological studies of hundreds and hundreds of languages. If you know an exception to it, then let me know. But I mean, this is, so here we have another way of looking at the same fact is that there's 7 sort of potential distinctions to make, but only 4. The sort of maximal system is 4. Or yet another way to put it is in terms of these universals, this is based on Jonathan Bobeljich's paper. No language distinguishes 1 plus 1 from 1 plus 3. None distinguishes 2 plus 2 from 2 plus 3. And none distinguishes 1 plus 2 from 1 plus 2 plus 3. So Mikhail Sisau, in his book on person paradigms, says, however great the semantic plausibility, the category 2 plus 2 is not found grammaticalized in the languages of the world. So a few years ago, I kind of took on the question of why. Why would this be true? It's a very striking fact. And just on the standard view of, it seemed to me there must be a deep answer for it, having to do with the semantics of person. On the sort of standard Kaplanian view, we have an utterance context is a tuple of parameters, and then the character of a form is a function from context to contents, and then the content is itself a function from worlds to truth values in the case of a sentence, and so on. So in other words, intentions. The contents are intentional contents. And so on that view, the character of the plural you could plausibly be the set of addressees, but the problem is, of course, it's not in any language that we know of. So Kaplan's theory doesn't predict those facts. And actually, it turns out, you might think, well, maybe on the Kaplanian view, it could be some superset of the addressees, but that turns out not to be true either, and I don't have time to say why, but you can ask me during the question session. Okay, so the idea that I put out in my 2010 paper is that this it seems impossible, and yet perhaps the first person, whether singular or plural, doesn't actually denote the speaker. It's not specialized for referring to the speaker, and the second person doesn't denote addressee. So first I'm going to show that we can get the sort of basic facts of person while maintaining this claim, then give some evidence for it, and then some speculation on why it must be true. Okay, so my basic premise is that a language is a system of rules that speakers and addressees should follow. That may be controversial, I don't know, but that's the basic idea. And so the rule for second-person pronouns is as follows. The addressee rule is addressees should self-identify as the referent of any second-person pronoun that they hear. So if you hear you self-identify with it. So self-identification is just a more general term than self-reference, because as an addressee, we don't normally use the term reference for what addressees do. But, so you just identify that pronoun as referring to you, in effect. Speaker rule, none. So C, Grice's cooperative principle. So basically, a speaker then says you when he wants the addressee to apply the addressee rule. And then conversely, for first person, there's a speaker rule that says speakers should self-identify as the referent of any first-person pronoun that they utter, and there's no addressee rule. So again, C, Grice's cooperative principle. So the addressee hearing a first-person pronoun assumes the speaker has applied the speaker rule. So here this is, I'll show you in cartoon form. So Mary says, you are pretty, and Paula applies the addressee rule and self-identifies as the referent of the second-person pronoun, and she self-ascribes prettiness. So communication is successful. How does Mary know to use that? Well, the thought bubble, she's got a picture of Paula. So fortunately, we have this ability to, called theory of mind, where we can do these kinds of Gricean tricks. So the speaker says you when she wants the addressee to apply the addressee rule. For I, so Mary says, I am happy, and she's applying the speaker rule, self-identifies the referent of any first-person pronoun that you utter. How does Paula understand it? She has her little thought bubble, and she assumes the speaker's applying the speaker rule. So it's just Gricean inference. So the summary is that speakers should self-identify with first-person pronouns, addressees should self-identify with second-person. Gricean pragmatics, or perhaps we could say just social cognition, does the rest. And the thing to notice is that the notion speaker and addressee are not part of the descriptive content of these pronouns. So first plural and second plural cannot be restricted to just the speakers or just addressees. You can't quantify over the set of speakers because speaker is not part of the content of the pronoun. Instead, self is, self-reference is. So just comparing then the standard sort of Kaplanian rules, first person refers to the speaker in the context, second person refers to the addressee, and then what I'm suggesting instead is speakers self-identify with first person pronouns and addressees should self-identify with second person. I wanted to mention there's a few related proposals, almost the same idea and kind of at the same time, and none of these people refer to any of the others in their papers, so it seems that, and they none of them are sort of were looking at the same evidence that I was. So not Kripke and Sainsbury and Filescu and Higginbotham weren't looking at this typological data. They were coming at it from a different perspective. Let's see, where am I? About 5 minutes? Okay. I think I'm going to, well, yeah, okay. I guess I can get through this. All right, so going back to this famous passage from Frege, where he says, everyone is presented to himself in a particular and primitive way in which he is presented to no one else. So Frege is trying to figure out what is the sense of a first-person pronoun. So Dr. Laubin thinks, I have been wounded. But then he continues, only Dr. Laban himself can grasp thoughts determined in this way. He cannot communicate a thought which he alone can grasp. So when Dr. Laban says, I have been wounded, he must use the I in a sense which can be grasped by others, perhaps in the sense of he who is speaking to you at this moment. So basically what I'm suggesting is that kind of this is where we went wrong, that actually the original meaning is the right one. That is the right sense, is that particular and primitive way. And that's basically kind of what Kripke says in this paper, Kripke on Perry, on Frege, on demonstratives. Surely one must give an analysis of first-person sentences where I is univocal, whether used in talking to oneself or in diary entries or in communicating with others. If it is the sense determined by its subject's first-person acquaintance with herself, how can it be used to communicate to someone else? Here's one possibility. The hearer is aware that each person, including the hearer herself, uses I to refer to herself by direct self-acquaintance. Hence, knowing what this is in one's own case and taking it to be the same way for others, one understands what the first-person statement is, even though it has a sense that is, strictly speaking, incommunicable to the hearer. So this is the same idea. I'm going to just quickly say that sort of another piece of evidence is, so this is basically kind of a reflexive view of first and second person. And so you might expect a homophony between first and second person pronouns and reflexive pronouns, and you do find that in some languages, so Balinese is one. Also Japanese, Shibun, for some speakers. And on the other hand, as far as I know, you don't find first-person pronouns that are homophonous with the noun meaning speaker in any language. And you don't find second-person homophonous with nouns meaning hearer, which is what one might expect on the standard view. Okay, so this is just a list of some of the evidence for the view. And now, the next question is, why must this be right? So why wouldn't a child actually acquire Kaplan's grammar? After all, it's very nearly that, the evidence seems to point in that direction as well. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many linguists who think that that's true. That's an important question to answer, and I'm just going to speculate in the last, how many minutes? 2 minutes. Okay, so, all right, let me just, using Kaplan's example, actually he's taking this from John Perry. He says, well, the idea of the character is we use it to individuate psychological states. And he says, when you and I have beliefs under the common character of a bear is about to attack me, we behave similarly. We roll up in a ball and try to be still. So what I'd like to point out is it's true we behave similarly as viewed from the objective perspective of the semanticist, but language users don't have that perspective. So for the language user, the way to connect the experience associated with uttering the sentence, a bear is about to attack me, and the experience associated with hearing this sentence, a bear is about to attack me, those two can be related only via empathy. So these are very, these two, everything about semantics is about erasing the difference between those experiences, because we want those sentences to come out as having the same meaning. But in fact, they're associated with very different cognitive experiences. And so this is basically what I'm proposing is a kind of empathy-based theory. That was the thought bubble, the Gricean part of it. So this is just actually another example using a subjective example like I'm hungry. So you have your experience of thinking or uttering, I'm hungry, there's a certain rumbling in your belly, that kind of thing. And then there's your experience of hearing someone else uttering it, and you relate those. We do learn to relate those, but it's essentially via empathy. And fortunately, humans are very good at that. So it turns out, although we're not much better than, actually no better than chimpanzees or a little better than orangutans at physical cognition, it's on the left, but we're much better than chimpanzees at social cognition, and so we're well equipped to carry out that empathetic process. And so here, let me just come to the end. So Basically, the idea is the experiences that a child learns to associate with hearing versus uttering a sentence that contains I or you, they're very different. And empathy connects those disparate experiences. The child draws a connection between her own self-ascription of a property and self-ascription by others. But the child uttering or hearing a first-person pronoun is not in the objective position needed to observe regularities such as whether uttered or heard, the first-person pronoun refers to the speaker. And similarly for second person in the addressee. So the idea would be that the empathy-based hypothesis always wins. And so this modest proposal is to just eliminate character and replace it with a serious theory of social cognition. Thank you.
We have time for questions?
Way back.
Can you tell me what's happening when you give an example and you're not talking about yourself, you're talking about me? As to say, what I just did, right? Where I'm using you, but I'm really not talking about you.
Well, I guess is that kind of use versus mention? You're mentioning the word?
Well, what I just did, literally, I really meant what I was doing, right? So I was really talking about me when I say, can you tell me about what happens when you are giving an example, but it's not about yourself?
The impersonal.
The impersonal meaning.
So how does that?
Okay, there are other uses. Actually, so like Jeff Nunberg's paper might be one way to get at that. So, but one claim is that there's first the indexical component, and then from there you can sometimes go to other uses. So there's this stuff on empathy tracking. Sophia Malmuth has an interesting paper on that. But that's one way of looking at those. But what's interesting is that they always seem to first have this indexical component that actually does refer to the addressee.
Yeah.
So would that predict that autism would prevent you to process pronouns?
Yeah, and actually, that is one thing I didn't have time to talk about here, but as it turns out, this is a kind of well-tested fact about children with autism, is they tend to reverse the pronouns. And so, so autism is thought to be a kind of deficit of theory of mind. And so in one study, they found something like 12% of the pronouns in the corpus of children with autism were reversed. So they say you for I.
I'm very interested in the sort of broader Gricean setting in which you placed all of this. And if I think then about implicature under the rubric of Grice's definition, that's something that requires the listener to model the speaker, or sometimes the listener to model the speaker, modeling the listener who models the speaker. They can get quite deep in terms of modeling beliefs and intentions. It would seem unusual there to use the word empathy to describe what's happening, as opposed to just modeling beliefs and intentions. So I might not be empathetic with you at all and still draw implicatures from what you say. So I'm wondering, did you pick empathy particularly for the indexicals, or would you like that to be used more broadly? Why not beliefs and intentions?
You're right. It's probably a bad use of the term. I thought it was sort of an easy, like one word, but it's too specific. You're absolutely right. You don't have to empathize. What I really mean is what you said, sort of intention reading and social cognition.
It doesn't even have to be Gricean, because I still means I and you means you in a non-cooperative conversation where we have conflicts of interest, and maybe I'm even lying, but I still means so.
You might still get implicatures in some of those situations.
Are you sure?
Kinds of cooperation.
One of the
cooperation
cognitive modeling
understanding.
thing is likely with an assumption that you have a common goal.
Well, I mean, the fact that you're having a conversation at all, I guess, suggests
I'm sure that Grice has more than that going on.
This is kind of programmatic. There's kind of a space here for real theory. That's why I said at the end, kind of a get rid of character and put theory. It remains to be present.
Good. Let's thank the speaker.